Okay, so I've titled this Helping the Poor in Africa and Beyond. A little bit of introduction. I'm the co-founder, actually, of the Economic Diplomacy Integrity. We've been 11 years in Croatia and now 2 years here in Costa Rica. Very thankful to God for that. I'm also a founder of Kagin's Consulting in 2013, and so we've been doing work all over the country. Thank you for the introduction. So when I was 10 years old, this is my son, Jacob. He's my oldest son of 4 boys. I know, you guys can sympathize. But when I was 10 years old, I just kind of did it. I didn't have a picture of me when I was 10, so anyways, he's covering for me. When I was 10, I saw a play called Les Miserables. It's a play about the French Revolution, about poor and rich, and it impacted me greatly, even though I was only 10 years old. And then I remember going outside in San Francisco at night, and it was a particularly, I grew up in a very nice, wealthy neighborhood, but this was my first encounter, I think, with poverty. And there was a man, African-American man, who was juggling, and he dropped the ball, and I went and I picked it up and I gave it to him. And I thought, well, he should smile and he should say thank you, but he didn't. He just kind of, went back to what he was doing. And I remember being very puzzled by this reaction, and it just affected me deeply. So fast forward to later on in my life, when I was in Croatia. I graduated from university in the US, and I went to Croatia. I got married to my wife. This is my wife, Ivona. And she was finishing studying, so I lived in Croatia for 5 years. And there I was thinking to myself, I was praying to God, when I was 10, I didn't really know God. But now, in my older age, when I was married, I did kind of have this relationship, and I was asking God, what am I going to do with my life? I graduated in economics, but I still didn't kind of understand what to do. So I was praying, and a thought came to my mind: agricultural economics. I'm like, agricultural economics? I mean, you would think that you would be a pastor in a church or something like that. But it really came agricultural economics, and I'm like, okay, I never grew up on a farm, I don't know anything about agriculture, but I'll give it a shot, And so I went to the first, for my master's, I went to the Faculty of Agriculture in Zagreb, and I was thinking, and it was very difficult. I had to learn in Croatian, and I passed maybe 1 exam, and then I was talking with my wife. My wife and I, we were in the apartment, and she was reading the Bible, and she came upon a verse, and the verse said, "A gift opens the way and ushers the giver into the presence of the great." And Justin, we need to accept the gift, and it will bring you into the great. And we thought, oh, because my parents were well off or something like that, maybe they're going to give us a gift, and maybe, we're going to get an apartment and, be able to live nice, But funny enough, my dad did call, and he said, hey, I spoke with your mom, which was unusual because they were divorced for a while. But I spoke with your mom, and we agreed to give you a gift. It wasn't an apartment, but it was education, further education. They said that they would help pay for my doctorate. So I was very thankful, and I had the opportunity to maybe go to the US for my doctorate. So thankfully, amazing things happened, and God opened the door to a great university, in fact, one of the best universities in the world, I think, for agricultural economics, called the University of California in Davis. This is in Northern California, and it's a very nice place. And I spent 6 years studying my doctorate in agricultural economics. Now, following God does not mean that everything comes easy, because I was thinking, well, I'm doing it, I'm following God, agricultural economics, and what I realized is agricultural economics has a lot to do with the poor. And this was something in my heart from a very early age, because most of the poor live off of agriculture in rural areas in Africa, even though in the US, not so much, and maybe in Costa Rica, there is some, but maybe less than Africa, but Africa a lot. So, but I get to the studies, and my first year, there are these exams, 3 qualifying exams at the end of the first year. And if you don't pass these 3 exams, you will be kicked out. And this was not a veiled threat, it actually happened. Many people got kicked out of the program. So I studied harder than I ever studied in the past. And I thought for sure I'd pass my exam, even though I saw that there were even other people that studied more, and I sometimes took, more breaks than probably I should. But I studied quite a lot, and I thought maybe God for sure is going to pass these exams for me, and I'll pass and I'll go forward because He brought me here, so that must be, the way to do it. And then I failed. I didn't just fail one exam. I failed spectacularly. I failed all 3 of them. So I only had one more chance for each one of them to pass them. So it was all or nothing, basically. And I was in tears, and my wife, she was comforting, but then at a certain point, she was like, okay, get up, study, do it, you'll be okay. And then she went to Croatia to visit her family. I was actually supposed to do EDI, directing EDI 2008 in Croatia, but I couldn't do it. And I had to have someone else do it for me. So I think there was only one other person that maybe was in my situation. Anyway, I only had one more chance. Then, for these couple months when I was preparing this second time, I really felt God's presence greatly. And I listened to a sermon from a man who had been through cancer. And he titled his sermon, Kisses from a Good God. And when things are hard, God is there even more present. And so the sermon really helped me. And then my mom, she didn't really know God, more secular. She would text me, how are you doing? How is everything going okay? How's the study? And I felt such love from her, like she was there my whole time. And then a friend was there with me, battling with me, studying with me. He was giving me songs, things to think about. And then prayer. Of course, I felt the presence of God very strongly. And then I knocked them out, like in baseball, like 1, 2, 3, and they were all, and I passed them all. And maybe this is a chance for me to say, God will always deliver you, But it's not always the case, because a friend of mine who equally prayed and equally was studying, he did not make it. But I thought to myself, look, even if they kick me out, I will go after agricultural economics. I will continue to follow it. I'll just go to another university, and I will do it more. So I had another plan, even if it didn't work out there. Thankfully, it worked out. So in 2013, after 6 years of my doctorate, I graduated, and I prayed, okay, God, what do I do now? And I really felt like I should start my own business. Now, I had the opportunity to be in the academics. I had an offer for a job, a steady job, but I felt from God, no, I have to do a business. And my wife, she comes from Croatia, which used to be part of Yugoslavia, which was a communist country. And she didn't really have this familiarity with going into business or entrepreneurship. So she was, of course, worried. And I knew that. I knew she would be worried. I hadn't told her yet. But then I was in church and I heard a sermon, and my pastor said, put on the paper, things that might prevent you from following God. And I wrote, Ivona, she's my wife, Ivona, baby, but I was a little scared. And because, we think we need to provide, we need security, and she was thinking that, of course. So, but I knew if I told her, she might be upset. And she was, but she wasn't upset for very long. She knew the passion, she knew that I was trying to follow the Lord. So, can you all hear me? Is it okay? Or is it too loud? Is it too soft? Okay.
You're not.
What?
You're not.
Yeah, hopefully not. So, we basically, she helped me, she supported me, and she had a steady job as well, so it was easier. But God proved Himself faithful. I earned the same amount of money I would have earned as if I got this full-time job. And then I started to earn more and more. So it was quite nice, and it's been successful so far. So what does Kagin's Consulting do? It's a development consulting firm that aims to alleviate poverty worldwide. And it specializes in local economy-wide impact evaluations, nutrition economics, poverty analysis of excluded groups, smallholder farmers, and economic analysis of developing countries. So I wanted to give you one project that I've been involved in, okay? And it may be a little bit complex, but I'm going to try to explain it in a little bit of an easier way. But I wanted to explain it because poverty is not always an easy issue, as those who've been in the field, as those people who are just speaking here have talked about. And I want to explain why you may need a PhD or something more to sometimes work in the field. So I work in Cameroon on a project with nutrition, and we work on vitamin A or other micronutrient interventions, and I work with nutritionists. And the problem is that there's not a lot of connection and not a lot of cooperation among people working in Africa on these issues. And resources are limited, right? So one program might compete with another. So what needs to happen? Better coordination and coherence over space and time, and there's needs for information. How much each intervention can contribute, costs associated with different interventions, economically optimal strategy given the options available. So you need data. You may need a model. And we put together this kind of data and model. We did it on the nutrition side. We looked at child intakes, how much they were eating, what they were eating, how much vitamin A they received, how much iron, and so on and so forth, and built a model around that. And then we looked at costs. And there are different ways to give vitamin A to children. In Cameroon, there's a thing called Child Health Days, which are big events that deliver quite a few other things, but also vitamin A tablets to children. If you don't have vitamin A as a child, enough of it, you could develop blindness, you could even die. So these are why this is important. And we looked at costs. Another important way to deliver vitamin A is through food. So you probably have this in Costa Rica as well, but you put vitamin A in oil, and it goes to everyone who has cooking oil, and they eat the vitamin A. So also in Cameroon, they have cooking oil, vitamin A in cooking oil. And we looked at costs. And then we put them together and we looked at what is the most cost effective. How much cost per child who gets the right amount of vitamin A. And we look at those economically optimal costs. How do we define a program success? This may be important to many of you guys who work in NGOs. You understand that if you talk to donors, you talk to people who want to feel, are you effective? Well, you can write about it, but you can also collect data and see, well, what's the cost effectiveness? What's the cost per child reached, let's say? So, for every child that we get one vitamin A capsule, how much does that cost? We would call that reach. They got the capsule, right? And we gave maybe 60% of those children we targeted, 60% of all children got the vitamin A. So that's called reach. Then we have something called coverage. Well, it's not just important who got the vitamin A, it's important whether the child was deficient, whether they didn't have enough vitamin A. So how many children did we cover? And then we look at how many children do we effectively cover. So even if we give them the vitamin A, is it enough to get them to be adequate, to get them to a level where it's sufficient vitamin A effective. So we call that effective coverage. So you see how it's deeper and deeper. It's easy to say, oh, we gave out 5 books. We gave out, 5 mosquito nets or something like that. And that's like reach, you know? We gave out 500,000 vitamin A capsules. That's great. That's not a bad thing. But can we go deeper? Can we think, okay, but how many children were benefited from it? How many children actually became vitamin A sufficient by it? And then of course we want to look at, in the terms of nutrition, we want to look at lives saved. Can we figure out how many children were saved by the intervention, may have died if they had not gotten the vitamin A in the past? So that's harder to evaluate, but the deeper we can go, the better we can evaluate these programs. So we use this model, we add different interventions like bouillon cube, like the cube that goes into soup. You know, we can think about maybe adding vitamin A there. We can think about other programs and we can put them into this model. And we can look at whether we can achieve the same amount of success, effective coverage, with this new intervention as with the old way of doing things. And I'm sorry I'm running through it, but I know we're pressed for time and it is complex, but I didn't want, I'll try to be a little bit slow. But basically, what our model showed in this case was there is a much more cost-effective way to deliver vitamin A in Cameroon to children 5 and under. And this is 59 months and under. And if you look at the original situation of spending 38 million a year, you can save that with 21 million over 10 years. And so you can save 44%. Now this is just one result of the model and it's a simulation. But there are many other types of results that we've shown, and these are the types of things that we do for evaluation purposes. And so the key conclusions in this project is, in general, fortification, putting the vitamin A in food, seems like a more cost-effective strategy in comparison with the child health days, for example. But there are limits to what it can do. And the optimization model can help what programs might be the more cost-effective programs to deliver. Okay, and then just to conclude the whole presentation, there's still more to be done with that project even. We're testing it in Cameroon and Ethiopia, and even to go back and test whether the children who have received the interventions really have achieved, because this is simulation, so you want to do data and things like that. So, and then you have to convince politicians and other actors, so we're working on that as well in Cameroon. You know, you have to see, does your research really impact the way? So you call upon Dennis or some other person to help you to deliver these items to politicians and to see what their reaction is and to work with them. Because political decisions may be different than just, you know, the hard evidence. So there's quite a few things. So I don't want this to be sort of a detraction, like, oh my gosh, I'll never be able to help the poor in Africa or anywhere because I won't be, you know, I won't go to the doctorate or things like that. But I want to say a few things. Pray and follow God's directions, even when things are not easy. Be persistent. Jack Fallow said that. I asked Jack, what's one of my, you know, we were in this at EDI, what's one of my values? And I was thinking like, oh, I'm a nice guy or things like that. He goes, you're persistent. And I'm like, oh, okay. but he meant that in a good way. He said, you know, 100%, doing things 100% well, but not doing it at all is worse than doing things like 60%, but actually getting it done, you know? So don't let perfection and what he meant was, don't let perfection get in the way of actually getting it done, yeah? So, and then don't think you can't help the poor now without much experience or knowledge. As June will point out later, it's our obligation, even if you don't have any knowledge, really, you need to be helping the poor, really. And then, but you may need to study the problem. Some of you may need to get a doctorate. Some of you may need to get a master's. Some may need to finish university or some other technical thing to really develop the tools to be able to help. And then not all solutions of helping the poor are easy, but some are. And a person I very much respect, he told me, you know, help the poor not to be poor. That's what you need to do. Help the poor not to be poor. It's very simple. In many ways, it's very simple. And Costa Rica is better off than all African countries. And you can make a difference there as well. don't think that it's far away. Yeah. So wow, look at that, right on time. Okay. Thank you very much. That's it.